Aaron Thomas here in Black Tulip Studios. Welcome to the Well-Mannered Monsters podcast, and joining with me today is your co-host, Scalise. How's it going, man?
Hey, I'm doing well. Great to hear from everyone. It's great to be here. Hopefully we've got some interesting content today. We're going to be talking about some real delicious, controversial stuff, so I'll let Aaron take us into that.
I know I let some people know that the next podcast was going to be about Olympus Dow. That's going to be moved to the third episode. We decided this week was just a little, at least some of the things that happened this week was just a little too juicy to pass up. Most people know that Elon Musk has a successful bid now for Twitter, and we just figured we had to at least broach the topic. So, Scalise, what do you have?
I think probably the most interesting thing is that Elon Musk was able to come up with, bring the bid up just a little bit, and then a few people have been really wondering just how he's going to afford it. Of course, this question flexes around the fact that most of his wealth is in his Tesla stock, so liquidating that amount could cause major problems for Tesla as far as facilitating a sell-off. So there's some questions there, but we've got a mysterious, from what I've read, family office behind the scenes that's going to be helping fund this endeavor as well. And then somebody else noted that he's using his Tesla stock as collateral, and that it might therefore have a margin call possible on it. So quite an interesting number whenever we're talking about the economics, what's behind the scenes. If there was a margin call, he might have a financer behind the scenes in that family office that would help him with that. So pretty interesting. I'm not sure exactly. These are just stories that are just coming out, so uncorroborated. But there's a lot of speculation on exactly how he's financing it.
So, are you aware of who Lex Fridman is?
No.
He's a popular interviewer. He's kind of one that I learned about through Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan. He does a lot of really good, probably some of the top interviews out there. He sent a tweet out the other day and was just like, Elon Musk acquiring Twitter is a big win for free speech. And then Crypto Steve Rogers, who I think is a little more right-leaning, just immediately responds to Lex Fridman and says, guess again, dipshit, now Elon Musk controls free speech. There's this back and... the split on this one is hilarious. Lex Fridman is a really well thought through guy, and he believes it's going to be good for free speech. And then I see this Crypto Steve Rogers who says that he's going to control free speech or be bad for it. And another tweet he puts out, Crypto Steve Rogers, to all crypto turds out there sucking Elon Musk's tiny eggplant. I'm probably going to have to edit some of this. Understand this. He's not one of us. He's an oligarch who doesn't give a shit about you, me, anyone else. Wake the F up. So, I don't know him well enough to know what's going to happen in the future. It's one of those things where I'm just kind of sitting and waiting to see what he actually does. I don't have any reason to think one way or another outside of the fact that I know interviews I've watched with him. One of the interviews I watched recently, the head of TED, Chris Anderson, did an interview that I thought was awesome. And in one of the parts of the interview, Elon Musk talks about how, Tesla was going through a really hard time, getting up and off the ground, getting their manufacturing facility up. And Elon Musk described sleeping on the floor in the factory, just with the workers, and said that he wanted them to see him in the same amount of pain they were, just, in the same grind. And I've seen interview after interview where Elon Musk talks about doing stuff like this. And granted, again, I don't know him, but if what he's saying there is true, like he did those kinds of things, I find it pretty harsh to just because he's a billionaire, be like, he's just an oligarch who doesn't care about anyone else. And I don't know. It's the evidence.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, the evidence from Elon Musk's own mouth and what I've heard other people say about him, that just doesn't seem to jive right. Now, granted, again, I don't know him. He could use this to do some horrible things. I have no idea.
What? Yeah, and let's parse this a little bit. So it gets a little bit complicated, especially when we discuss this in the town square, because there's actually an equivocation happening based on what does the phrase free speech mean to the person using it. And so what's become abundantly clear, and what Elon Musk himself has said, is that you can say bad things. You can say bad things about people that you don't like. And I think exactly what he said was free speech is disagreeing with people you dislike, I think is what he said. And so to me, that's a very clear definition. Essentially, basically, he's given the maximum situation where you'd want someone to be silenced. It's somebody that they're saying something I don't like, and I already don't like them. There isn't a situation where it gets much worse than that, or could motivate you to silence somebody other than that behavior. And that's what he's just recently said on it. So again, don't know him, doesn't matter. Could he be lying? Maybe he could. But what I want to draw out here is the fact that when the left is going crazy and they're saying it's going to be a disaster for free speech, he's going to shut it down, he's going to control it, these type of stuff, you've got to recognize, and this is the game the left plays, that the way that they define phrases or words and culture is radically different than the way that you would. So for them, free speech means something like being able to direct the narrative in a way that's favorable for their agenda, which is, it's like crazy, but it's the same thing they do with everything else. They always masquerade one thing that the general populace would probably be pretty agreeable to, while then just defining it in their own head as this thing that uplifts and their tyranny and emboldens their power, right? So you got to recognize when you're listening to this debate, and you got to do a little research on the people saying it and how they're going about saying it. Because the same thing with democracy. I mean, when the left uses democracy, and it's one of their favorite, this will be a disaster for democracy, is one of the things they've said. Right. I mean, that's what she's really saying is this will be a disaster for the democratic lawmakers that are part of this democratic USA system, being able to control the narrative and frame the conversation. That's what's really being said there. It's not going to be a disaster for democracy. And by the way, that's another kind of, it's a strategy to obfuscate, to confuse the conversation, as you use words that are just basically a bit oblique to begin with, that they have a very broad range of meanings that word could have across the cultural discussion, and then it makes it really hard for anyone to hold you accountable. So when you say a disaster for democracy, I could ask the question, like, what do you mean by democracy? Because I could come up probably with 10 different definitions based on the country we're looking at.
Because like you said, democracy can look like a lot of things, be a lot of different things. But back to Elizabeth Warren, I think her tweet actually said, "This deal is dangerous for our democracy. Billionaires like Elon Musk play a different set of rules than everyone else, accumulating power for their own gain. We need a wealth tax and strong rules to hold big tech accountable." That was the tweet. Somebody who I think I last saw was bringing, well, I don't know. I'm not going to say that because I actually don't know what her monthly income is. I don't know if what I saw, somebody posted that it was like $400,000 a month, something like that. I think that's probably pretty extreme. I might actually take that out, to be honest.
Well, and it's irrelevant, exactly what it is. The point, I think that the larger point here, whether she makes, $40,000 a month or what have you, whenever you start looking at the net worth and the way that they wield their power, and then obviously what we've all come to believe is a largely fraudulent election system, that they basically somehow perpetuate their stay in Congress forever. I mean, that's a big deal. How do these people get into Congress and then they never leave? So forget all the other questions about election integrity. Just ask the question about how do you really think the constituents of any of these Congress people just love them across the course of 50 years? I don't know anybody just across my 20 plus years of voting now that has stayed consistent with liking the same type of candidate over that entire time. I know very few people like that. Now, there's some out there, but my point is, the whole notion that she can stay in power, because power and wealth are two sides of the same coins in many respects. But however much money she's making, she's postulating as though he has a unique set of rules because of his extent of wealth or power, and suggesting as though these Congress people don't is just nonsense. Right now, it might not be the exact same set of rules that Musk plays by, based on the fact that he's arguably the wealthiest person in the world, but it's going to be on the upper tier of power side of things, right? So if there's a taxonomy there, fine. How we rate who has more power than somebody else. The point is that you're not on the side of the common man, and postulating yourself as though you are is nonsense.
Well, I would argue based on Elon Musk's actions, what he did with his workers, when they were in a really hard place. And I think, interestingly enough, I believe I saw an interview with him not too long ago where he actually said that he was homeless, or didn't have a home that he was presently living in, and bumped around from one friend's house to another. And overall, his actions compared to somebody like Elizabeth Warren, to me, would at least suggest somebody who's, regardless of how much money he's worth, is in far better connection with the people than someone like her. And again, I don't know him, but what he does or what he seems to do with his money and the actions outside of that, with his family, with the people who are hired under, or, with the workers that he has, seems to suggest, I would say, something.
Well, and we should hold out that possibility. This is actually something that J.R.R. Tolkien was really famous for in a lot of his narrating and writings. And then really the character I'm thinking of here is Fëanor, who the movie doesn't do a great job doing. Fëanor, doesn't do a great job showing this, but in the novels, Fëanor is like this kind of extremely virtuous person, even though he's an extremely powerful person. So he wasn't able to be tempted by the ring at all. And, our society, this day and age, everybody thinks everybody's corrupt to the same degree as they are. If you're a billionaire, then you're just as corrupt as Soros. Or if you're a billionaire, you're just and of course that could be the case. But the point that Tolkien would make is simply that just because you're somebody with abundant power, commando, and Fëanor was, he's like nobility and part of the ruling class, and he's got an entire segment of men he commands where he can kill whoever he wants or save whoever he wants. So you have these type of people out there. And just because they wield that type of power doesn't mean that it automatically corrupts them. So I think that's something to remember, because the fundamental narrative that the left is relying upon is just that to have X amount of wealth means that you're corrupt, or X amount of power means that you're corrupt. And this is really them. This is them projecting, because probably the majority of the people on the left, I'm not going to say every one of them, but the majority of the lawmakers on the left probably fall into that category in one way or another.
Yeah, no, it's Elizabeth Warren is definitely one of those who has a really checkered past and a checkered present. So it's just,
I just think about the whole Pocahontas things that Rush Limbaugh used to grill her about, and I guess Trump too, right? I mean, just that in and of itself is a measure of fraud, especially because it was tied to political expediency, which equals growth and wealth. So it's strange how, fraud functions a lot of different ways. Like, clearly you're a white lady.
Her first use of that, first use of faking her ethnicity was actually used to get funding for school, right? Wasn't that as far as how she was able to make it through and get certain special positions and whatever?
I don't know. I don't know enough about it to speak to it, so I won't. But drill down on that if you're listening to us. Check what we're saying, because this is me just based on what I've heard over the years. But it's definitely tied to her political career in one way, to a greater or lesser degree. And you look at her. You look at her and you say, you're an English white woman. Like you almost couldn't look more white.
Yeah.
It's like me saying I'm. Well, maybe not. I look pretty tan, but maybe you saying you're a black person, right? Because you have two generations ago, I had an uncle who was black or something. Who knows?
Which actually brings up another funny part about some of the tweets that are going out right now is some people are making this, rather tongue-in-cheek, but it's a real claim that Elon Musk is going to be the first African-American owner of a big tech company like that, or one of these big social media companies. I think it was focused in on social media company, something like that. But I believe he's South African. I'm not entirely sure about that, but they've been, obviously using that to troll
they've been
people.
going after him for being. Yeah, they've been going after him a little bit about being this apartheid. This is, I think, Joy Reid on MSNBC was labeling him, the white son of apartheid ideology, something along those lines. I'm butchering it, but it's definitely along those lines for sure. Can I shift gears here?
Yeah,
real quick?
definitely.
So I thought this was interesting. I saw this came out really recently, and what day was this? Let me see. It was either yesterday or the day before, but Sagar and Jetsy says the top censorship advocate at Twitter. Well, Vijaya Gaddy, the top censorship advocate at Twitter, who famously gaslit the world on Joe Rogan's podcast and censored the Hunter Biden laptop story, is very upset about the Elon Musk takeover. And then he cites the story, and then Elon Musk responds to this, and I think this is very interesting. This is his response. Suspending the Twitter account of a major news organization for publishing a truthful story was obviously incredibly inappropriate. And the truthful story he's referring to is the story by the New York Post in October of 2020, just before the election, that Twitter suspended and took down. And they didn't have any access to their website on Twitter for, I think it was a week before they allowed it to be put back up. But it's very interesting to me that Elon Musk is responding to something along these lines that deals specifically with the election issue of October 2020, and obviously the major impact a story like the New York Post and the laptop from hell story of Hunter Biden could have had. And we're seeing that, right? We're seeing what actually is on that laptop, and it's really damning for the Biden crime family.
Yeah, to say the least.
That could have been happening in October if it wasn't for Twitter, because Twitter, in many ways, Twitter frames a lot of people that prepare news each day use Twitter as their feed to put together what they're going to discuss. Yeah. So in many ways, it acts as the initial filter of what let's say the town hall, the frame of the conversation is going to take across the country in that daily news cycle. Anyways, but it's very interesting that Musk is jumping into what's clearly an election issue.
Yeah.
Of his own accord, right? He didn't have to comment.
And considering what happened last election cycle, last presidential election, there does have to be a little bit of fear in regards to him taking over Twitter, because if he actually follows up on what he says he desires to do with Twitter, it is going to be a completely different ballgame next cycle. As far as, because they successfully suppressed and silenced a large amount of people throughout that process, and also bolstered or propped up just false information all over the place. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens these next election cycles.
Well, yeah, the phrase is you're taking away the framing potential of the left.
Yeah.
And as I've said many times, if you can frame the conversation, you can win the conversation. And so Twitter being kind of that initial filter for what the news cycle is going to look like, that's going to take on a mass effect. And you got to remember this. Somebody might say, well, what if the left just doesn't use Twitter as their filter? Well, the platform's already built out. You're not going to have people just leaving massively. I've seen some of these lefty groups say that they're going to leave or what have you, and that's fine. But can the left afford to ignore, let's say, a free and open Twitter platform and the stories that get generated? I don't think so. I just don't think they're going to be able to ignore it. It's too big a platform.
So, what do you have any thoughts on what you think he's actually going to do? Are your bets on him truly fighting for an open platform, something that pushes free speech?
I think so. He said, I think he's gonna follow through with it. And if he doesn't, it'll be really apparent really quickly. It won't take long. And there's in what you're going to see happen if I'm right, because I don't think this isn't a fiscally beneficial situation for Musk. It might end up being so, but Twitter's been on the decline. He's already said that he's not planning to make money on it. He's probably going to have to invest a lot of money into restructuring certain things. So I don't now again, like, Musk might be somebody that thinks in terms of 5 years rather than 1 or 2 years. So maybe over the long run it becomes very
I'd say it's
beneficial.
pretty clear that guy thinks in a very future or forward thinking manner. There's definitely no doubt with what he's built. As far as like being on point strategy wise, he is able to build, and that's one of the things I'm excited about with this. I'm kind of curious to see what kind of competition he offers a lot of these other platforms, possibly even YouTube. I could see them taking Twitter to being more of a video centric type of platform, also, where you can actually go in and do YouTube like functions natively inside Twitter without going to some of these other platforms. I would love that, to be honest. If he took it toward, if he truly fights for it being an open platform, a place for free speech to thrive, and starts including YouTube-like functions and other ways of actually just getting the word out, it's going to be interesting, man. This is going to be it's going to be an interesting tool for people generally to have.
I would say, I think let's say we take him at face value that he means what he says about what free speech is, and that's his intent, because there isn't a readily obvious other reason for him to do it. And then secondly, I mean, he's not been one to submit to bullying or any intimidation from the left. So that's another reason to think that he's actually going to fall. That's a big one, too, because a lot of Republican, conservatives, what have you, they might speak strongly whenever they're in their own little club, but whenever they get in public discourse, they cower. And he's not done that. So that's a very good indication that he might follow through as well. So I'm feeling like we take it at face value, see what he does. And here's my prediction. I think what will happen, inevitably, because we've talked about this before, is you have to have thresholds about what you do censor. Any moral society will, because there's going to be some things that are morally reprehensible and horrific to show. So, for instance, child pornography is something that should never appear on Twitter, right? So, and you could list these things. You could say, well, anyone that's trying to sex traffic children should be censored, right? You don't want to be facilitating that type of grotesque, immoral behavior. But what will happen is that Elon Musk will have policies on what he does censor along these very strict moral traditional lines, and then they'll say that he's not fulfilling his free speech, he's squelching free speech, etc., when really he's preventing criminal activity. But that of course will get lost in the tabloids. So I think that's my
and that recent interview with who was it? Chris Anderson, the head of TED. One of the things he described there, because they talked about his acquisition of Twitter, or at that particular time, I think it was the pending acquisition of Twitter, and he asked, what kind of rules were they going to abide by? What kind of rules would Elon Musk use to dictate what could be on the platform and what couldn't? And Elon Musk made it really clear that obviously you have to follow the rules of the countries that you're operating in. So, that pretty much gives you the groundwork right there, or at least the guidelines for how, what isn't going to be acceptable and what is going to be acceptable. And I think that's fair. It also, theoretically, depending on where you are, is a framework that the people decide on, right, through voting and, having their representation enforce or take away certain laws. So it's...
Yeah, I think I saw him comment on that, actually.
Yeah, no, that was what he said in that interview, was that he was going to follow the laws that various countries had. Like, wherever Twitter basically operated, that they would have to follow the laws of the countries that they operated in. So, I'm not sure how that looks entirely. I mean, obviously you're going to I guess you'd have, different things censored depending on what location you're actually accessing Twitter from. because I definitely hope that we don't get censored, or at least what content you and I can view is decided by, what's good and right in China or someplace like that. I hope it's
Yeah. China actually shuts down the whole internet. They don't play games. They don't just shut down a site. They say, no internet for you. You're like, what? No internet? There's places on this planet where the government could just say you have no internet. That's wild. But yeah, no. So I saw a spokesperson for Brussels. I guess the head of the EU there already threatening Elon Musk. Got to obey our new law we just put in place. So you're still going to have a free speech battle against the globalist. And for those of you not up to speed, the EU and the United States, we're all kind of hubs of kind of this globalist, to me, criminal cabal. Yeah, they're transnational criminal syndicate, effectively, that is so powerful that in many ways they're above the laws, but it doesn't mean they're not transgressing the very laws that they're above. So, but you got to watch these people, and that'll be the new battle. But that'll be a much better battlefield than what it is right now. Right now, it is uniformly conservative thought and speech and ideology is censored and downcast and shadow banned across the entire globe. So if we get to a point where it's freely spoken of, those ideas are freely spoken of in a big part of the world, and then, you go to any of the EU countries, you're not allowed to talk about it. Well, that's good. That's a very glaring, obvious, why can't I talk about this? Plus, there's things called VPNs, which could make it become very useful if you live in one of those places.
I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens. I think if there is a billionaire out there that has the intention and wherewithal and capability of actually doing this, I think he's probably it. Again, I don't know. It's hard to tell. You and I both have no intimate knowledge of Elon Musk, but based on his public presence and what I can see about what he's done, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what he does. I mean, granted, I don't want it to be the sole focus, because I'm really excited about the potential for having a big platform like that and an actual free speech zone where we can come and gather. But it has been pretty satisfying to see the left melt down the way that they have this week. And granted, like I said, and that's not an unimportant narrative to watch. It isn't.
The left doesn't act that way. They'll try to create doubt. Like, they'll try to say, oh, well, no, like, he's just a billionaire or whatever, right? But when you see them actually almost going into panic mode over it, probably tells you that Musk is going to do what he says.
Yeah, and countries already threatening to ban the platform if he takes it over. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's one of those things where it's like, guys, considering what was done with the previous leadership, can we just sit and watch and see what he does and then judge the actual actions? It'd be nice.
Well, the left they've gotten too comfy with. They've had 2 years now. Well, not 2 years. They've had about a year and a half now of basically having unilateral control, apart from the alt media sites, of framing the narrative, and they're spoiled.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of news networks out there, small news networks trying to pop up that were attempting to use Twitter to actually get their product out, and a lot of those guys have been destroyed and marginalized in ways that have made it so their businesses couldn't thrive. And I want to see things like Project Veritas come back onto the platform. That'd be awesome. I love the material that they put out. Their guerrilla journalism, going ahead and putting people in different places, like actually getting inside information and releasing that out. I feel like that's extremely healthy for our society to give groups like that the ability to put their product out, to put that information out, so people can actually make some seriously informed decisions. And it's going to be exciting to see Project Veritas come back on. Exciting to see other groups pop up too that previously just couldn't afford it because they got shut down pretty much wherever they went. And it's a landscape right now that's more or less owned by the left, and what our biggest, at least what people have thought is their biggest bastion for right-leaning politics is Fox, and I think that's a joke, to be quite honest.
Yeah, that's a total. Ever since we're calling Arizona at 70% for Biden.
Yeah.
Like, what? Hold on a second here. Ever since then, I've been utterly disillusioned and disinterested in Fox.
Yeah. But Twitter, like Elon Musk said, has such a massive potential for societies and people all over the globe. I just, if it's truly unleashed and given the chance to be the true town square where people can freely come together and talk about their various ideas, put them out without getting shut down, I mean, it could be amazing. It could absolutely be amazing. The potential there, considering what we've grown up and been used to, it's going to be fun to watch. I'm excited. Like I didn't think this was going to happen. I pretty much thought he was going to get completely shut down, and then
I thought he was too. Which let's ask the elephant in the room question. I was talking to my wife about this yesterday morning, and it's just the fact that before the weekend, the Twitter board was utterly opposed to having anything to do with Elon Musk's bid. So far, to the extent of not accepting the bid, even though it's totally beneficial for all the shareholders. But then they were going to do a rights offering, which is a way to basically just make it extremely more expensive for Musk to buy. So they had this whole plan. They had their legal team on it going into Friday. And then on Monday, we learned that, hey, it's cool. He came up a $1.5 billion, and now we're totally in favor of it to get it done and have an announcement for the end of the day Monday. Something happened behind the scenes there. I don't know what it is, and I'm not going to speculate, but you don't flip like that from being the utterly liberal and woke institute like Twitter, totally opposed to somebody like Musk, to welcoming him with open arms like he's the savior walking.
Do you think it flipped, or did they just flex bigger than they actually had the capability of, and there was actually more support that they were attempting to suppress or ignore?
No, something. I mean, because even if they flexed harder than what they could get done, they still would have slow walked the deal. It's just like having it, being utterly opposed to it Friday afternoon when the market's closed, and having these emergency meetings into Saturday, all in extreme opposition to Musk. And then by the end of the day, Monday, you're announcing that Musk is taking it over. No, something happened there. I believe, and I could be wrong, but I just they would have at least slow walk.
It's and whether what happened is something that's favorable for what we hope to actually happen with Twitter.
Well, I did notice this. I saw a story that there's a typical deal and a typical acquisition like this or takeover. There's something called and I can't remember what it's called, but it's an open clause or something along these lines. And what it does is it allows other bids to come in.
Yeah, I was reading that
during the closing period. So that was absent as well. So again, that further supports my argument that something happened. Whether they got I mean, who knows? Right? Actually, I'm not going to speculate because I don't know. I just know that's extremely strange.
Yeah, and I have no idea what could have happened there. That just, I mean, obviously you can speculate on it. That's some kind of threat, but what kind of threat would have been used? I have no idea what goes on.
Yeah, I mean, this is where you'd have to get into some conspiracy stuff, which I'm not opposed to. I'm just not going to run down. I don't want to get off on that right now. But
gotcha.
But
yeah.
I mean, maybe we can go there. No, I mean, you got to ask the question: what type of motivator could be provided to get them to flip like that? And then I'll let our listeners decide, and then maybe they can comment. But I have some ideas. I just don't. Nobody knows, right? And I hate to just discuss stuff that I can't demonstrate.
Yeah, and hopefully we get something really good out of this. I don't know if that's going to be the case yet. It's going to be something to watch for sure. I know I can't stand where it was going. I know what was presently being done with Twitter is something I find pretty atrocious and just extremely undesirable.
Well, you know me, I didn't even want to be on it, except for my involvement with cryptocurrency. I mean, other than that, I would not have been on it at all. But
same with me.
Take a listen to a few of these numbers.
Yeah, cryptocurrency or following the projects that I was involved with. It was pretty much that and Discord. Well, I'm on Twitter and Discord almost for that reason alone, just following crypto-related projects that I have either money in or I'm interested in investing in, or is just, fun to see what is actually being created out there. But continue.
Yeah, see what type of craziness is being facilitated in the crypto markets. And take a listen to a few of these numbers, though. Maybe we'll get into some crypto. But just in the past few days, so these are interesting indicators of whether what Musk is going to do is going to occur or not, and how the left is interpreting it. So I think these numbers tell you a lot of what you need to know. So yesterday, Hillary Clinton lost 17,600 followers.
Yeah.
Obama lost 5,000. Nancy Pelosi lost 13,000. And AOC lost 27,000. Now, that was yesterday. Let me give you the past 24 hours today. So listen to this. So on the left, Rachel Maddow lost 18,000. AOC lost another 11,000. That means AOC's lost almost 40,000 followers in 2 days. Kamala Harris lost 16,000. Joy Reid, 9,000. Nancy Pelosi, 3,500. Jen Psaki, 8,800. Chris Hayes, 9,000. Stacey Abrams lost 13,000. Media Matters, 2,100. And Chuck Schumer, 8,300. Now, when you pair that, and I'm not going to list all of these, but with a few examples of the type of followers that the right is getting now on Twitter, it's wild. So Ron DeSantis picked up almost 100,000 followers in the past 24 hours. Donald Trump Jr. picked up 90,000. Jim Jordan picked up 51,000. So we're seeing all the lefties in the red and all the righties going up big in the green. So I think, and we were speculating earlier, this is either Musk already has some measure of control and he's correcting things, or more likely, because I think the acquisitions take time, I don't know exactly, but more likely, basically Twitter's having to correct the record before they hand the keys to Musk. And so they're trying to incrementally actually make these numbers what they truly are without bots and shadow banning.
Yeah, there's a kind of funny account. Have you seen Cat Turd on Twitter?
No. Oh, yeah.
He or she, I actually do not know much about this account at all. I know I've been following them for a while because they have some pretty funny takes, but he put a tweet out and said that 40,000 followers just popped out of nowhere. And I'm kind of curious, what happened there? If this was the beginning of them scrubbing the bots that were following a lot of these lefty accounts, and then the shadow banning, where you essentially have more followers on these right-leaning accounts, like the ones you listed, that just aren't being shown publicly. They're not just they're basically shadow banned and not publicly visible. So, because how do you just get 40,000 new followers out of thin air?
Yeah, I don't know. Not for. So if it were a new member of public discourse, that would seem feasible, right? Like when Ron DeSantis first came on the scene, or Don Jr. first came out, you might say, okay, well. But I don't just on a 24-hour period. And again, I don't know anything about the metrics, so maybe it's possible. But I think all the lefties in the red and all the righties in the green, that tells you a lot. Because there's a big list here of the right. You got Lauren Boebert, OANN, War Room. I mean, they're all in substantial green on their following.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. It wouldn't happen like that either. You wouldn't have just a massive amount of people all of a sudden hitting the follow button because Elon Musk took over. I think the likelihood that these were new followers and not ones that were actually just... And again, like you said, I don't know how the shadow banning actually works behind the scenes, but I would bet that most of the people that popped up on those accounts, like just having that many new followers, it had to have been mainly old followers, people who had tried to follow them in the past. That's my guess.
Probably, yeah. Like they've turned down their influence by hiding their actual numbers. I love what Donald Trump Jr. put out just recently. He stated, and this was yesterday, seems shadow banning is yet another, quote, right-wing conspiracy theory that was 100% true. And if you haven't been following along, friends, since 2020, from the PCR tests to the vaccines, to shadow banning, to censorship. I mean, it basically and I was keeping track of this at one point, and it was like, I mean, it's like when I stopped keeping track of it, it was conspiracy theorists are up 13 to government tyrants 0. So what the government tyrants and media told us was wrong, and what the conspiracy theorists said was true and correct. And so I just love the fact that Trump Jr. is pointing this out, because it's coming to a point now where when somebody says that's a conspiracy theory, at least in my mind, I think, oh, I should probably look into that because there's a high probability it's true. Like that's where I'm almost at. Not with some of the like radical right stuff, but with stuff that at least makes it into substantial part of the media, and then they feel the need to cover it and say it's a conspiracy theory.
Well, and speak to that too. How the word conspiracy theory has been turned into some kind of pejorative. It's like that one I find funny in and of itself. Like just using the word conspiracy theory is this way of saying it's not something that should be talked about. Like explain what a conspiracy theory is.
So I've parsed this out pretty closely, but it's a serious interrogator. That's a person who's questioning. Yeah. Okay, it's a serious interrogator seeking out to find out if something is true, usually within a layer of corruption or something that is designed not to be found out. So that's what a conspiracy theorist is. It's somebody who is a serious questioner who does research to determine if what they're being told is nonsense or not. And so I don't know, like when I hear conspiracy, like I think, oh, that somebody who's going to be a critical thinker. And again, like we could list easily people that aren't, right? There's people that spin all sorts of crazy ideas that are maybe deserve the negative sense of a conspiracy theorist. But my point is just that the vast majority of people into conspiracy theories are people that are serious questioners, that are trying to not just believe what they're
I wonder.
Like, oh yeah, like I'm going to believe the mainstream
media. Yeah. No, and like you said, when they make a claim of some kind, like in this particular case with Elon Musk being this complete degenerate billionaire oligarch who wants to control free speech and control, the thoughts of mankind, this, that, and the other, and it's just like, I'm going to go ahead and give him the benefit of the doubt right now. I'm definitely further encouraged to give him the benefit of the doubt, and considering the truth, like the little bit of truth that I know about him from his interviews, even more so. Like I genuinely believe he's going to do something good with this platform. I hope he gets a chance to, though. We know that a lot of these guys, if you have multiple countries, including our own, decide to, what was that Title 230? What was that just came out?
Yeah. It's the, I don't know. It's either Title 230 or it's some, but it's the clause that basically gives these big tech companies a measure of liability protection from being sued for what comes across, because they are they're not editors or publishers. They are a facilitator. Mm-hmm. And so that's what a big deception is. That's why that type of coverage should not be. So recent. Because if you censor, you're acting like an editor.
Yeah, and that's the crazy part, right? Because Twitter has essentially been in violation of that for a long time now because of the censoring that they've done. So Joe Biden, I guess, is looking at reforming that and trying to do something, and that would, essentially be used as a weapon against Elon Musk or the Twitter platform in the future.
I I guess. I mean, they're going to have to carve out exceptions because they're going to want their controlled lefty leaning platforms like YouTube and others to still have that protection, although they're editing by censoring as well. So I don't know how they're going to do it, but it always it just seems like a total show and circus whenever they have these big tech I guess CEOs come before Congress. It just, to me, it always just seems like nothing ever happens because I used to be hopeful. I've watched those now for about 3 years. Every time they come before Congress with the hopes that the Congress is going to do something, but a lot of strong words, a lot of strong accusations, but nothing materialized.
So what do you think is going to happen with that? I personally...
Well, the left finally has motivation to do it. I just don't know how much longer they're going to have it. I think 2022 is a total blowout for the Dems. I think they're done. You know, obviously they could try to steal the election like they did with the presidential election, but way more challenging to steal local elections like that than a national one, just because you have more people, more eyeballs, and I can't remember. I think it's like one county. There's like one winning per county. It isn't like duly counted on both sides. I can't remember exactly the details of that, but I know that it's far more difficult to steal local elections than it is a federal one.
Yeah, I pray he gets a chance to do what he wants with this platform. But I also know that the people that are running, you know, that have their hands on the levers of power at the moment are very capable of killing this thing before it even has a chance. And can we say they do kill it? Can we really rely on the U.S. people right now to rise up and fight against that? Or do we let them destroy somebody like Elon Musk for trying?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly what type of actions we would take. There would be the obvious get on Twitter and make a lot of noise and show your support, et cetera, that type of thing. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think, I mean, if it gets into the aristocracy up there with Washington and the elites, I mean, with the way that they control the elections, and if we don't have just a resounding defeat of the Democrats, I'm not really sure what behavior can be taken to try to prevent them from destroying Musk. They're going after him. Actually, I got stuff coming across my feed right now.
Well, the SEC.
They're like death threats and all
that. Yeah, the SEC previously tried leveraging. I forget. I know. Again, this last interview I watched, he goes through. It was hilarious too. Actually, he's just like SEC bastards. He just like it was pissed off, but I need to look at that again. But he was describing how they attempted to, they basically forced him into making a decision. I need to get the specifics on that, but the threat was actually to bankrupt Tesla. They used the threat of bankrupting his company in order to force him into a certain situation. So it's not. Well,
I know the DOJ and the SEC also made some announcement that they're going to be looking into Elon Musk. As soon as he said he was going to buy Twitter, that came out. So, clearly the left is going to weaponize everything they have at their disposal to try to stop this. I think this is happening too fast, which just takes me back to my question. What happened over the weekend, this past weekend, to get them to flip? Because, they need time for that.
They do.
They need time for them to be able to really weaponize it. With Musk moving this quick, and with the changes already happening on Twitter, I mean, even now, what is it? What's today? Is it Wednesday?
Yeah, it was really fast.
Right? Yeah, it's just Wednesday. Yeah,
I was thinking we'd be waiting months, something like that, before we'd actually see some kind of turn.
I was too. So I think this is probably a good place to stop. But little summary here, and then kind of what to look for. We need to pay close attention to what they're going to do, the left, at least on weaponizing Elon Musk, or weaponizing what they have at their disposal against Elon Musk, and see how they ramp that up. That should be very interesting. And then we need to continue to watch these numbers. I love the fact that we got the digital soldiers out there that produce these numbers on people losing followers and gaining followers. Again, that's a narrative in its own right. That tells us a lot of detail. So I think we continue to follow that, and then we keep asking the question, what happened over the weekend? Because at some point that story is going to break, because something happened there, and it'll be interesting. So I think those are three biggies that I want to kind of keep a lookout for going forward.
Yeah. And it's going to be interesting to see if Elon Musk keeps his word on what his intent for Twitter is in regards to making it a place for free speech to thrive. So, yeah, that...
And real quick, and with that too, also putting an asterisk there and say, and what type of behaviors is he going to prevent? Because right now what happens is the left can do death threats and all sorts of stuff that you typically can't, you're not supposed to be able to do anywhere, right? You're not supposed to be able to issue death threats to somebody in person or digitally. But it's totally unbalanced now where the left does it all the time. So, and like I said before, I predict that the left will call that censoring free speech, even though that's really saying, no, there's certain immoral behaviors that you can't do anywhere, and we're going to apply it equally. So let's keep a watch on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll follow this up in another podcast at a later point, maybe, a month or so down the road. Give us a little time to see what he actually does with the platform, or hell, we might even end up just doing random podcasts covering what happens, because I have a feeling this is going to be a lit couple months as he takes us over. It's going to be interesting to watch. But
should be totally delicious.
well, thank you guys for joining us today in the Well-Mannered Monsters podcast. Thank you, Scalise, and cheers.
Cheers.